Welcome to another edition of the Simsbury Woman. I'm Barbara O'Connor. I know we've all spent hours reading to our children, often the same books over and over again, to the point we know that our children would know if we changed a word and make us correct it. Some of these books were so simple we'd have to think, gosh, anybody could write one of these. Others so clever we'd wonder how the author was inspired to write the tale. Today I'm pleased to have as my guests two women from Simsbury who have recently published books for children, books that both entertain and teach the youngsters who are read to or who are reading them themselves. Welcome today, Karin Lefranc and Laura Swenson. Before we get into your actual books, I'd like you to tell us a little bit about yourselves. Now, Karin, I understand this is not your first children's book.
No. This is my second. My first children's book was called A Quest for Good Manners, and it was published in 2011, and I self-published it. And this is my second one, and this is traditionally published with a New York publisher called Sky Pony Press.
Okay, great. We'll get into some of that self-publishing, traditional publishing, and all that a little bit later. But how did you come to write a book? What was your background before? Were you doing something else? Was it something in your life that...
Well, I've always been writing. I haven't always been writing creatively. Like a lot of writers, fiction writers, say that they've been writing stories since they were 6 years old. And I wasn't one of those, but I was a writer. And so I was an English major in college. I went on to write for the local paper. I worked for the Avon News and the Farmington News here. I went on to work in publishing in London at Virgin Books. And so I wrote a lot of cover copy, press releases, things like that. Mm-hmm. And then I moved here and I opened a store called Over the Moon. And I was teaching a little manners class. And I saw that there wasn't a book on manners that was really fun and would engage the kids. And so I decided I would write that book. And that's what I did, and that got me started into the whole world of children's book publishing, which I think of myself as a good writer, but I had a huge learning curve to write for children.
I can imagine. I mean, something that seems so simple often can be among the most difficult things to write. I mean, I remember back reading E.B. White for guidance on writing form, and him supposedly saying to somebody, I'm sorry this letter is so long, I didn't have the time to make it shorter. That sometimes the simpler you try to write, the more difficult it is. That, you know, when you think of when you're writing in college and all that, you usually are measuring things by the page. And then when you get into business, you're doing the opposite, where you want to make things concise and clear. But then going back to creative writing has to be a whole new venue.
And picture books are the shortest. And, you have picture books, then you have middle grade, which is for 9, 10, 11, 12-year-olds, which are like Harry Potter or the early Harry Potter. And then you have young adult, which is like, Divergent or Hunger Games. But they say that picture books are the hardest because every word counts. Mm-hmm. The average picture book is between 300 and 1,000 words. And you can't waste anything. You have to develop character. You have to develop a story arc. You have to end it on a surprising, profound note that makes the child say, please read it again. There's a lot of pressure.
Oh, yes, I know that. I think personally my favorite book to read to my sons when they were little was Good Dog Carl, because it didn't have any words. Read it till the end. Yeah, they learned to read that one real fast. Now, Laura, what brought you into the world of writing a children's book?
Well, I actually was also a writer, but very different from picture book writing. I wrote for the Central Intelligence Agency. I was an intelligence officer. So I started out writing for the National Daily Brief and writing intelligence assessments, like 100 pages that, trust me, nobody would want to read. But knew deep down I always wanted to be a teacher. So after I left the CIA, I went back to school and got a master's degree in education with an emphasis on reading and writing, and then started teaching elementary school, and had like they say Richard Peck, who is one of my favorite middle school, the 9 to 12. He says that it's what you come across in your regular day that sparks an idea. And those are the best moments to write, like just the ordinary, not trying to come out with something like outstanding, but just a regular event. And so this was a regular event that happened in my day, and it kind of stuck with me. And 12 years later, I decided it was time to publish it.
So you wrote it, and then
I wrote it,
put it in a drawer? Or?
Yeah, pretty much 11, 12 years ago, waiting to, I had in my head what I wanted it to look like, and as I tell my students now, I can't draw a decent stick figure. I have no artistic ability whatsoever. So I knew I wanted it to be illustrated, but I didn't know by whom. And one of my students is a very gifted artist, and last year I was like, I found her. So I asked her if she would illustrate it, and she did.
Now, the two books that we have here, your book, the illustration styles are very different. And I think that with a picture book or a young reader's book, the pictures are so important. Yours, Laura, your book really looks like it was drawn by a child. I mean, I know I read about your students, and she made it look like a child younger than she had
Yes.
illustrated it. It's but it really, when you really examine it, you can see how clever she was and how detailed and how talented.
Extremely talented.
It's just a beautiful, and it really flows with the story, with what the child who's the central character is going through with his family and the townspeople and just the whole concept of a pajama day, I think, is something that most folks can relate to, because I think we've all had a child who wanted to wear certain things all the time.
Yes.
And we've all had somebody crying at the washing machine because their favorite outfit was in there.
You should tell the viewers what it's about. Yeah.
Well, it's about a little boy who likes his favorite blue feety pajamas and wants to wear them around town, and does, in fact, wear them around town. And it is loosely based on my own son, who had his favorite feety pajamas. So what I actually did was I had a picture of my son in his feety jammies, and I gave the picture to Danielle, and that was really it. I mean, I didn't give her any direction or instruction. I was like, here you go. And then she really made the townspeople. So the little boy in the book goes around town wearing his pajamas, and everybody frowns, and he doesn't understand why, because his life is so happy he's in feety pajamas. And so that's how and he convinces the town to change their frowns and become smiles. So, but Danielle just sort of took the book, read the story, and then just sort of took it from there. I mean, and she kept asking me, well, what do you think? Do you like this? And again, I had it in my head, but I don't have enough talent to put it on paper. So I really like her. The characters really came alive through her.
Yeah, she did a very good job with it. Now, Karin, yours, on the other hand, is more, the illustrations were more, they reminded me of like an Eric Carle book, or some of the, I can't remember the name of the illustrator who would do things with collages to illustrate, just lots of color blocks and things. How did you come to that?
Well, I had very little choice, because when you go the traditional route, we were talking earlier, Laura and I, about when you have a self-published book, you have a lot of control. So my first book is very different illustration-wise. The illustrator, it's very pretty and spectacular and sumptuous, whereas this is very energetic and boyish and lively and hip and modern. And my editor at Sky Pony was the one that found the illustrator. And she does, obviously, she did send him the sample illustrations to me that he did. And she said, do you like him? She asked me if I liked him. And I said, yes, sounds good, it's good. But I really, it is really the publisher that chooses.
When you go the traditional route.
When you go the traditional route.
It does, okay. Yeah. Now, your first book, you said, came out of what you saw as a need for teaching children manners. This book is more about, I think, tolerance but also fun. And because of the monster in it, I know the library was promoting it as part of their Halloween
Right.
thing. What prompted this particular book?
Well, I think I was at a writing conference, and a lot of story ideas start what if. I'm putting together a presentation now for schools, and it's called What If. And so I knew that little kids were liking zombies, and all the editors in New York were like, oh no, that's too scary for the little kids. And I'm like, no, we don't have to make it scary. But the middle grade and the young adults had the zombies, and there was Plants and Zombies was really popular. And frankly, a zombie is just another monster. And kids love monsters, and how many monster under the bed books can you have? So
Right.
this was just a new take on that. So then I asked the question, well, what if I had a zombie as a main character? What if instead of eating brains, my zombie ate books? What if the students have to find him a book that makes him change his ways? What book would this zombie want to read instead of eat? So that's you asking, and that's how you build an interesting story, or that you try and make it something different and unique.
Now, you've mentioned this workshop where you got ideas and stuff. Is there a whole community of either established and aspiring or mixing authors?
There's a fantastic children's organization, Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. It is an international organization. There are members in Simsbury, in all through Connecticut, all through the United States, in Australia, in England, and we have regional meetups and national meetups, and there are workshops there. You get to meet with other people, other writers, other editors, agents. You can go, if you're a new author or someone who's written a picture book, you can become a member. You can go to the New England one in Springfield. It's in June, I believe. And you can pay $50 or $100, and you will sit down with an editor or an agent in New York, but they're coming up here, and they will critique your work. And it's a phenomenal way to learn the craft, because it is a craft. And even if you're a good writer, it's good to have as a basis, but it is a craft that you learn to write for kids.
There's also an organization, CAPA,
Yeah, there's
Connecticut
CAPA.
Authors and Publishers, and it's right, they meet monthly in Avon.
Oh,
Yeah.
so there's a whole local support network then for
Right.
for authors.
Right.
And now, you self-published this book, and Karin,
I
you said
did.
you had done your first book. When you decide to self-publish, I mean, what do you do?
I didn't really
make
know.
that decision to
I didn't. I honestly didn't even try to do it the traditional way. I think I knew that it would be too hard, and it had already been 12 years. So I just it was on my bucket list as something I wanted to do. So I decided to self-publish. I was going to go with an online publisher, and had looked into it. And I teach in West Hartford, and there was a teacher there who had published a book through an online publisher for our students. So I looked at that. It looked pretty good. So that was the route I was going. My husband and I did a lot of research. We found which were the top 3, looked into it. But then, again, I had in my head what I wanted it to look like.
Yeah.
I'm a very visual person. So it wasn't the right size, and I couldn't get the color the way I wanted. So a local friend who had some connections in southern Connecticut hooked me up with 2 men right here in Connecticut. And one did the layout and the typeset and all of that, and one did the publishing printing part of it. And they were excellent. And things that, again, I think that I'm detailed, but well, do you want it glued or sewn for the binding? Like, I don't know. I don't care. But then I realized, because it's something you think you don't care, but then I went and looked through all my children's books that I still use for teaching, and I was like, oh, there is a difference. And so it was really a lot of trial and error and asking questions and going to the library and looking at other books. And I was very thrilled with the final product. There was a lot to it, though, that I hadn't. Like, do you want the
paper
jacket,
covers,
right?
jacket
And
covers and all that, yeah.
End pages. And
right, and it just
start.
there's
Things that almost kind of make you say, what?
Right, and honestly, it's like, I really just want to write. You can take care
Yeah,
of that. And
yeah.
finally, they would just do it, and then they would send me they would send an email with the PDF. Do you like
Right.
A or B?
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, and that's sort of how we did it.
Now, I would assume to a degree that one of the differences between self-publishing and a traditional publisher is a lot of that is decided by somebody else.
Yes.
Like you said, that
Yeah.
the illustrator.
Also one of the biggest differences is that, say we had an idea right now, and just say Scholastic wanted to buy our book. We wrote a book, the three of us together. They would slot it into 2017, maybe 2018. So that is a big time distance.
Right.
Whereas if we were to self-publish, we could get it out this year.
Yeah, this probably
And
took
that's
about
huge.
6 months, start to finish. Once it was,
once you had it ready to go to a, once you started looking for a publisher, I guess, or once you
Yes.
found who you
And a lot of
who you
that
wanted.
were the illustrations, because again, Danielle and I didn't really know what we were doing. I mean, we knew what we loved to do, but we didn't know the publishing part of it. And she said, "What do you think about watercolor?" I'm like, "Sure." Well, watercolor is probably the hardest type of illustration to get into a book, because of the
Just the way
shading
it's
and
put
the
together,
paper
yeah, and
and
printing,
so
yeah.
we couldn't scan it, so each page had to be photographed, and then the photograph had to be scanned, and then had to be touched up, and it was a long process.
Now, I would think then too that another difference between self-publishing and the traditional publishers is the amount of support you would get for marketing and distribution. When you self-publish, you do it yourself, right? Everything.
Everything.
I mean, I bought the ISBN numbers. I bought 10 of them, so I can write 9 more books. Yes, I mean, everything you do.
Do you then have to like copyright everything and do all the legal?
Yes,
legal
that
things
actually
like that?
isn't that
It's not
hard.
complicated. Everybody
no, once you
thinks
have the
that's really
ISBN,
complicated.
that was actually easy. You can
It's
buy the
copyrighted
ISBN.
as soon as you publish it. In
Okay.
fact, I mean, as soon as you even write it.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're right. That wasn't the hard part. It was like the minutia. There just was a lot of it at various, the writing was the easy part. And again, then the ISBN number, and then all the other stuff.
Now, did you have someone look at your book in kind of an editorial role?
I did. And again, the advantages of self-publishing. I didn't like what she had to say. So I felt like she missed what I was trying to do. So I said, thank you very much. And then the man who did the layout and the typeset, he did the final edit, for, spelling and grammar was
Proofreading,
fine,
yeah.
but the proofreading and, I think you need a comma or you missed,
Yeah.
like typos
That
kinds
kind
of
of thing,
things.
yeah.
So it wasn't, I'm sure somebody will pick it up and say, oh, this should have been edited.
Yeah.
But again, I fiddled with it over the 12 years that it was in my head and
Right.
on paper. I mean, this
Yeah.
isn't the original version, so.
Now, Karin, are you working with an editor at this publisher, the traditional publisher, for your next book or whatever? Or?
No, I have another picture book which I haven't sent in about the color gray. Everybody, he's really upset because no one ever chooses him as their favorite color. It's always pink or green or red. And so he thinks that if he joins the rainbow, he'll be noticed. But that's not quite ready to send out. So I'm working on that. I'm also working on a middle grade novel. And that is a fantasy novel.
Now, for those, would you go the traditional route, or do you think you would self-publish?
Oh, I don't think I would self-publish again because it's so much work. Just to deal, I'm reminded when Laura's talking, you do have a lot of control, but you have 100 emails with just the designer. You have emails with the typesetter. You have emails with, the printing and the research and the layout and I had it edited too. And you're back and forth with the editor, and then it's just monumental. It's monumental. Just makes me tired listening.
Can you, is it, easy may be the wrong word that I'm looking for here, like getting your book on Amazon?
Yeah, that's easy. Anybody
it?
could do that.
Is
You
it?
could write anything today
Yeah,
and practically put it on
easy.
CreateSpace. CreateSpace is their website, and you could publish it.
Oh, really?
I did it through Amazon Marketplace, and it wasn't difficult. I had someone help me, and that wasn't a problem. And I have another book in the works. I'm about 2/3 of the way through, and that's a middle grade. And I'll probably, just because of the topic, and it is a chapter book, Danielle's already agreed to do they're not going to be illustrations, more like drawings, sort of little characters within the book. And that I may try traditional, mainly partly because of the topic and just because it's going to be more to it.
Now, are your books in stores locally?
This one is actually at the UPS store. Because I
The
was,
one down in Simsbury Square?
right,
Or-
because
yes.
because I was shipping so many out, so there are a couple there, and but it's not in any stores. That's on my list. But
That's
So if
something
someone
that-
wants to
yes.
buy it, where can they buy it?
Amazon,
Amazon.
through Amazon.
Amazon, yeah.
It's on my list to get it into local stores, and then that's what I was supposed to do over the summer, and then the summer caught up with me, and school started, and I haven't had a
Well, maybe
chance.
some of the local entrepreneurs who might see this will contact you, because I know it's also in the library. Both books are also
Yes,
in the,
I did donate
in the,
one to
in
the
the
library.
here. So that, and is your book also at Barnes and Noble? This
Yeah.
one,
It is, Canton Barnes & Noble had sold out, but then they replenished, so they should have a good stock, and they can always order it in. It's available anywhere books are sold, and if they don't have it in store, the bookstore can order it, because the publisher has a huge distributor that organizes it.
I became a fan of Kindle because of, unfortunately, sitting in nursing homes with my parents, and the ease of having that and having different books. I have a problem wrapping my head around a children's book as an ebook, although I know so many kids now are always on tablets and things like that. How do you feel about the ebooks and children's books?
Well, I mean, it is available as an ebook. I don't think it's as popular. Picture books are a little bit different, because that's one thing
Yeah.
that you do. If they're so beautiful, and that you would lose
That's
something
what I would
Turn
think.
in
the
the ebook.
pages.
Yes,
and-
yes.
Sorry.
Yeah, I would think that too with a children's book. I couldn't visualize.
And it sounds like, I have not read your book, I'm sorry, but it sounds like, I think children's books often, and if you think about the Dr. Seuss books, I mean, there's a message beyond just for a child. You can get a book at many different levels, but I know my book is you're supposed to like sit down and read it with an adult, because it's a picture book for children, but there's a message
Yes,
for adults.
yes.
So I think you lose that if you're looking on a screen.
Yeah, I would hope that as we become more technologically involved with everything and connected, that the act of reading to your child would not change so much, that there would still be the turning the page and together looking at the book as opposed to the screen. I just think there's something that gets lost in that translation of what's
And especially
what's
with
in
picture
there.
books, when you're writing them, and editors will say this again and again, it is about the page turn. So you're wanting that child to really want to turn the page and what's going to happen. And so the illustrations are as important as the text in helping create that page turn momentum. So it's a very tactile and something that you really do together with a parent or a grown-up and a child. So,
Or even a friend of mine, it was like made my day. She sent me a text with a picture of her daughter. And she said to her daughter, as soon as I put the baby down, we'll read a book. Go pick out your favorite book. And she picked out my book, which was, makes your day. But, even at 2, too. She was able to turn the pages and find her favorite picture, which actually also happens to be my favorite picture of the policeman in his fuzzy blue jammies. And so she couldn't read it, but that was her favorite page, and she just sat waiting for Mom looking at that page, of the book, because she doesn't have to read the words to know now that she's read it, it's been read to her enough. She knows what's happening. So she just waited on the page with the policeman.
Yeah, that's great.
Is there any advice you would give to somebody else who might be thinking of trying to write a children's book?
I would say definitely try it and join a group, whether it's Kappa or SCBWI, and it's tremendously rewarding. It's infuriating at times and crazy, but it's a wonderful, nourishing, creative thing to do.
Is that how you feel the same way?
Yeah, I say just do it. I mean, you have nothing to lose. If it's on your bucket list, give it a try.
Even if you self-publish it then in your kitchen or something with it.
Doesn't matter. I mean, sometimes we just have a story that we want to get out there. I mean, I remember I kept driving past the Pinchot sycamore tree, and I wasn't a writer at this point. I mean, I was a writer, but I wasn't a creator. I was like, I want to do a poem about that tree. Like, me? Why am I going to do a poem? But it kept nagging at you, and I think that's what happens with stories.
Right.
And I eventually did it, and it won, the Simsbury Land Trust a few years ago, and the Kappa Creative Writing Award, and it was just a poem that I had inside me that had to.
I wrote a poem about teaching, and it was published in The Reading Teacher, which is an academic journal. And, that was years ago, but it gives you that, like, hey, I can do this. And everybody needs a creative outlet. I mean, I think particularly now in the age of electronics, and you need to have, for me, I mean, even when I have students who are upset or whatever, I mean, I usually say write it down, because it's a great coping mechanism, and it's just keep a pad of paper next to your bed, and they're like, Mrs. Swenson, I have all these ideas, and I'm like, just keep it, and I can't fall asleep until I get rid of the ideas. I'm like, so write them down.
Because creativity is about listening to yourself, and there's so much outside stimulation, and so you have to silence yourself a little bit to listen to your own ideas. But when they do start popping up, and in whatever way, whether you're making up a new dish, or you're writing a book, or drawing a painting, or gardening, or whatever it is, when you're using or being creative, your true creative self, that's like the most nourishing thing in the world.
That's great. Well, maybe our conversation has inspired another budding author in Simsbury. Thank you so much for joining us. The books are I Want to Eat Your Books by Karin Lefranc and The Upside Down Frown by Laura Swenson. They're both at the Simsbury Public Library and on Amazon. Thanks very much for joining us, and I hope to see you again soon for another edition of The Simsbury Woman.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.